our fight united in our hearts, and we've also received the support of women and men from the conservative side as well. And our fight is not over yet, but we have many examples, many strategies and tactics that we can tell as examples. We've had very examples, so I did not want to intervene, and you explained it very well. Even this topic itself could be a topic of a separate Zoom meeting and webinar, maybe thanks to interpretation opportunities. We can talk to our colleagues from other countries, because this is not an issue only for Turkey. Within United Nations, Turkey, Iran, Russia, Hungary, and Poland is a bloc, and they are in alliance. They are conservatists, right-wing governments, and there are some international conventions that protect the rights of women that have been gained after hundreds of years of fight. And now this bloc of countries is targeting these conventions. So this is not only the fight of Turkey, this is a fight that we need to maintain on an international level. And now we have our friends from Armenia who are with us, and we also have friends from Georgia, but our friend from Georgia is not going to take the floor for now. And Milena Abrahamyan from Armenia, and Mariam, I am now checking the names, Dautyan. We have two friends from there, and they will talk about the processes there, militarization of the society, and the problems that women experience during birthing. So they will contribute to this meeting on these issues. Milena, I will now unmute your microphone. Are you ready?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you, Yıldız, for inviting us to be part of this wonderful gathering. Mayranush and I are going to speak about issues that are important for us today, and I would say issues that are not so well addressed as we would like. Well, one of them is about militarization, increased militarization in our context, and the issue of women when they're giving birth, and the kind of treatment that they receive by medical institutions in Armenia. But before I start, I wanted to actually say one thing about the Istanbul Convention, because Armenia has adopted the Istanbul Convention, but has not ratified it. And in the past year or so, because there are talks about ratifying it, there have been some conservative groups that have been trying to sort of talk against it and raise a whole movement within society to go against the ratification of the Istanbul Convention. And I think it's interesting when it comes to the backlash in Turkey and in the context that you named, Poland and Russia. I think it's interesting looking at our context and how this has not even been ratified yet, and how it's already like receiving some backlash. And it's interesting too, because mainly this has to do with the term gender, which for maybe a decade already has been receiving a lot of backlash from conservative groups in Armenia, because people associate the word gender with the LGBT community, and especially when it comes to transgender issues. So they think that this convention is going to allow for people to freely change their gender, and that's going against traditional values according to them. So I think this is an important thing to keep in mind. What I wanted to talk about is and of course, I think all of these things are interconnected, but I will speak more about militarization in our context. I will start by talking about waking up this morning and learning about military bombardments in the Autonomous Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a region between Armenia and Azerbaijan that has been subject of a war for 30 years now. Um, so Armenia is in a state of war for 30 years, and it has been called a frozen conflict because there was a ceasefire in the 90s, but the war has never actually really stopped because there's still clashes along the borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan. And today, which is unprecedented for since the 90s, there was an attack on the capital of this autonomous region, and there was an attack on civilian villages and places that people live. So now we're learning that there have been 17 casualties and hundreds wounded. And it's been a very, very overwhelming day to learn about all these things that are happening. So now in Armenia, we actually have there's been an announced military martial law, basically, that's what you call it. And there's also mobilization going on among the men in the society to take them to the border and to take them to basically to go to war. I think what's important to note is also that this has been kind of building up. In July, there were some clashes in some of the border villages between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I wish I could have created a presentation for you so you could see the map and have a better understanding of what I'm talking about, but I didn't have much time. But in any case, I think it's important to note that in my view, and I think in the view of a lot of people who analyze the situation, this is a kind of proxy war where smaller nations actually suffer at the hands of bigger nations. And the proxy war basically, in my views, between Turkey and Russia and basically their interests in the region. There have been recent military joint exercises between Turkey and Azerbaijan in August. And also there have been some joint military drills between Armenia and Russia as well. So this has all built up to the situation that we are in today. Besides this, we are in a context, because we have been in a war, even though it has not been an active war in the past 30 years, we are seeing, especially as feminists in our context, that there's increasing militarization going on. In 2016, before the change of government that we had in 2018, which I will mention a little bit so that you can understand a bit better the context, we had the previous government bring into society this new concept of nation army, which was meant to consolidate all state and civilian structures and institutions in the defense of the country, and in a way to try to erase the divide between the army and society, so then all of the society members would become defenders of the nation. So basically, I was telling Maydanush today, I was saying that, I don't know if one day or soon in the future, I'm going to be, judged by what I do in general and with my life here, if by the standards of, are you doing that to defend your nation, or how is that supporting you defending your nation? So basically, all of our bodies becoming sort of machines or tools to defend a nation. And of course, this has a pretty sort of long historical it has a historical story of nationalism in this context, which I will not go into because I think that's another topic. But I think it's important to think about this concept that was introduced in 2016, the nation army context. And of course, since the change of the government, it hasn't really been referred to so much in this way, because it was brought on by the previous regime, which the current government basically had a revolution to oust. But the sense of this concept continues to be a part of our lives. So for example, there are some billboards that were put up during the time that this concept was introduced, that are still hanging in the highways and in different places. So it's not like it's completely gone. It's just not being called the same thing, but there is a continued militarization. And one thing that I think is important to also mention with regards to militarization is that Armenia is a country that has mandatory conscription, which means that when you're a boy, I would say, from 18 years old, you are taken to the military for 2 years. It's mandatory. And one of the criticisms in 2016 with the nation army concept was about how there was corruption in the military. So there was a short 4-day war actually in 2016. As I mentioned, the current today's war that's ongoing right now has a history, and it's been building up. So like there are little mini couple of day wars here and there and mini clashes here and there, which have led to today's situation. But in 2016, after the 4-day war, there were some criticisms that there's, because of the corruption inside the military, there were soldiers who were fighting or using expired weapons from 1980s. And there was a huge kind of call within society to overlook or reform the military in general. And of course, because we are a very militarized nation, there's a lot of budget that goes into the military where it can actually go into some other things. So there was a huge question of, well, we are giving all this money, or all this money is spent for the military. Where is that going if our sons and our brothers and our, the men in our lives who are in the military are fighting with expired weapons, or who don't have access to the things that they need so that they can actually not die if they have to fight. So I think this was an important thing that was raised. But one thing that remains in the margins with respect to the issue in the military is the issue of non-combat related deaths of soldiers. So every year we hear of at least 5 or 10 or sometimes more soldiers who are killed in the military, but not because of combat related deaths. And there are parents who are fighting to sort of try to understand or recover the evidence that shows that they were not, they didn't kill themselves, or or most of the times they're blamed and it's said that they killed themselves, but it's more about the masculine kind of the very masculine macho culture within the military that ends up with fights, or someone is not liked as much and then they end up killing them, maybe beating them to death, and it's supposed to be part of the culture of the military, which is of course unacceptable. So these are some of the things that we are dealing with in this respect, with the issue of militarization. I think that I'm going to talk a little bit more about how militarization affects women's lives, but I think it would be really great to hear Mayranush share her personal reflections with regards to this, so that we have a bit more of the personal kind of storytelling aspect before I continue with the context. Sorry, before you unmute me, Ayildiz, someone said, I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm not sure if it's a matter of translation. I didn't have a loss. There's a war in my country right now, so I mean it is a loss, but I didn't personally lose someone today. But of course, I'm sorry for the loss of the people that have died today, and that are continuing to die because of this war on both sides of the border.
gelmiyor şu anda.
Evet, şimdi duyduk. Marinuş görünmüyor. Tamam.
Mikrofonunu açmaya çalıştım. Tamam.
Marinuş,
Türkçe kanala
are you
ses
okay?
gelmiyor galiba. Evet, şu anda duyuyoruz.
Hey, can you hear me? Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Evet.
Okay,
Duyabiliyoruz.
thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I just want to share a little bit about the reality me and a lot of female assigned people live through in countries where war is something that we live with. So before I was born, my parents were told it's going to be a boy. And now I wonder, while carrying me in her body many times, my mother grieved my assumed inevitable mandatory departure to the army for 2 years at the age of only 18. And I wonder how many times, while nourishing the fetus with her own flesh, she tortured herself with the thoughts of all the inevitable traumas and death inflicted by an abusive officer and army mates serving the system, of course. And I was marinated in war since even before being born. After being born, I was made to believe through lullabies and myths and tales and songs and dances, I owe my life and my body to some motherland, which I've never chosen to begin with. Moreover, I have never consented to borders that divide us. Every so often, each and every year, through celebrations of violence and destruction and brutal death, I'm being reminded how big of a part of my life war is. They poison my life by the culture of violence that is called heroism and a sense of guilt if I dare to go against the system. In this motherland cage I live in, my basic needs like medical care are being neglected to buy military tanks. Every single month, I am made to give away the scarce resources I have so that the system can buy power guns. And I become an assistant in the crime of murder and destruction. And my body is being weaponized one way or another. On one hand, as someone who has a womb, I'm being made to believe the purpose of my life is making as many soldiers and wombs that will make soldiers as possible. And on the other hand, I'm coerced to believe if I want to be considered equally human, I should be eager to mince my flesh in the war machine, just like my brother is being made to do. And so, in other words, the worse I am, the better it is for the motherland. It sounds very, very disturbing to me. And yeah, basically that were my thoughts about all these situations. And thank you for listening to me.
We also would like to thank you very much for both of you. We felt as if you were talking about us and telling us about ourselves. This heroism story of the Turkish society and the militarization stories are almost always the same. And the resources that is spent for militarization, the resources that is spent for military bases are not being spent for the welfare and health of the society. This is a common problem for both of us. In 2000s, we had a slogan, the common enemy in every war is women, actually. So we are the common enemies in every war. And there is a war against us, women, actually. So again, now from Fındıklı, we have a lawyer friend, Elida. I would like to, Milena wants to continue, by the way. Okay, we will let Milena finish and then we will continue with Elida Önal. Milena, you can maybe unmute the microphone.
Sorry. Thank you, Yıldız. Mayranush and I actually planned that we would kind of have me and then her and then me just finishing, so that I can also touch on the subject of the issue of the women giving birth and the problems that arises if I have enough time. Yes? Okay. So I just wanted to also talk a little bit about the cooptation of feminist concepts for the purpose of militarization also, because under the pretext of equality, our leaders suggest that women become part of the military industrial complex by not only providing their bodies as birthing machines for future soldiers, but also for fighting in the war. So, but of course, amidst all of this, the stereotypical role of women as peacemaker is also sustained. So as I mentioned, in 2 years ago, in 2018, we had a so-called revolution, which brought into power the current day's regime, which has done some things that are, better than the regime before. But at the same time, we see that there are some things that are not moving in the best direction for women and for feminist practices. So we see that there's a lot of neoliberal kind of policies being moved forward through this new regime. But one thing I thought that would be interesting to also mention here is that the Prime Minister's wife actually initiated a kind of project called Women for Peace, where she often calls for peace, as she has done, for example, in the recent clashes in July, when she called on Azerbaijani mothers and women to call for peace. But she also sends mixed messages which promote war. So recently she initiated a military kind of training with women in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we saw photos of them dressed in military gear, holding weapons and doing military training. And it was just very strange to see that this is someone who's promoting peace, but doing war in a way, right? Or playing war. And then we've seen that now this kind of project that they've done is being extended into a program which will be organized in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense, and it's open to girls aged 18 to 27 who want to acquire basic military skills. And also recently, another kind of sort of project or program was announced called the Home Guard, where there's a plan to create a state-supported volunteer corps of up to 100,000 people, which will operate alongside the armed forces. And this is also encouraging women to apply. So I think these things are really important to keep in mind when we're talking about the militarization and the continued normalization of war, weapons, camouflage. And everybody here was talking a lot about what they're doing in their context and the successes and the practices that we have. I would say that the increased militarization in our context is actually making it more and more and more difficult to critique war, if it doesn't make it impossible, because if you critique war, then you are deemed a national enemy, which makes it really hard to be a feminist who is feeling a lot of pain from seeing what's happening around. And the last thing that I want to talk about is about the situation of women giving birth, especially under conditions imposed on medical institutions during the COVID lockdown. So we have seen that even before this virus, the limitations that were placed on our lives before this virus, women in Armenia were already having a difficult time to bring their partner or even one other person with them when they are giving birth. And this was also more difficult when they were in public medical institutions. So if you were in private, which means that you give money, then it's easy. You just take your person, whoever you want with you. But still, this is talking about the differences between the different classes of women. If you have money, you can have a nice, a nice birthing process. If you're not rich, then you just will be stuck in a medical institution with people, with doctors and nurses who are getting paid low amounts of money, and they're not going to treat you very nice. And you're going to be subject to a lot of different psychological, emotional, mental abuses while you are giving birth and you are in pain. And not to mention that you are also going to be subject to physical kind of violations also, because there's an issue of non-consensual interventions also, that doctors scare women so that they can have an emergency, whatever, just different things that doctors do. But with the COVID limitations now, it's also impossible for women to have a partner or anyone with them, even when they're in a private medical ward. And recently there was a woman who died in a medical institution after she gave birth. And her partner, no one was allowed to be with her, just like it is for most women now who are giving birth. But she died because of the negligence of the doctors, who knew that she had an allergy to antibiotics, but they still injected her with a different kind of antibiotic, but still, and she died. So I am pretty sure that if she had somebody with her who knew, who was, a dear person to her, they would not have let them do this intervention. So I think that this is an important issue that we are now starting to talk about and organize around, actually. So hopefully next time we meet, I can tell you that there are some things that we have done with regards to this issue in our context. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me talk again, Yıldız.
Biz çok teşekkür ederiz katıldığınız için ve bu önemli
We'd like to thank you as well for participating and for your important contributions. You actually made visible some issues that were not seen before. But as you said, this forum was not sufficient for us. And in the upcoming process, we are designing a longer time. So in preparation for that, and actually to get to know each other, we convened today. So that's why we apologize for cutting everyone short, because interpretation will end at 8 p.m. So we have time until 8 p.m. So now I leave the floor to our other lawyer friend, İlayda Önal. Now she will have the floor and she will talk about local women's experience. I'm in the car and she's joining us from her car. Thank you very much. Despite being on the road, you kept listening to us, you were with us, and now you have the floor. Thank you very much. I was going to apologize for, we cannot hear you.
Geliyor. İlayda, bir konuşabilir misin?
Layda, can you try speaking?
İlayda konuşabilir misin? Geliyor mu ses? Çeviri olması
lazım.
Okay, probably you will be able to hear me now.
Evet.
You're on the Korean channel, right? I'm able to hear. I think I'm on the original channel. You can all hear me, right?
Çeviri için Kore kanalını seçmen.
For the interpretation, you should be on the right channel.
Kore'yi seçtim. Tamam. Sanırım çeviride oldu. Kusura bakmayın gecikme için.
Sorry for the delay. I am on the road. I thought the most calm and silent place would be inside of a car, so apologies for speaking to you on this date. My name is İlayda, and I'm a lawyer, and for around 4 years I have been working on violence against women and domestic violence and children's rights. And for 1.5 terms, I worked on the Rize Bar Association as the chairperson of Women's Rights and Children's Rights Committees. And of course, I had the opportunity to be in close communication with the community and with the public. So I want to talk about the women's status in especially the Black Sea region. Our foreign colleagues, international colleagues would probably not know the Black Sea region as well as we do, but I will try to give you some examples. The women in the Black Sea region are very strong. They are very strong women, and they are used to be described as women such as men. They call them as manly women to tell how strong they are because they work in tea cultivation, they collect tea, they look after their livestock, they milk their cows, and they earn money. But men don't do any of these works. And so in many cases, women are separated from women in these cases. So in most other places, women live at home, they stay at home, and men earn the money. But on the Black Sea region, women take on several roles and they earn the money and they're strong. So here there is a different dimension of gender norms because women work as tea laborers, but tea is sold by men. Men go to the public area, they also make contacts in the government or in the public institutions and sell the tea. And mostly in these regions, men go to nightclubs and they spend the money in these clubs, and women suffer a lot because they have to stay at home with the children, and this creates a great problem in terms of the status of women here. And as well as this, violence is not well known by women, and men also do not know about this. So this is a big problem. My lawyer colleagues talked about the Istanbul Convention and the legal status, and of course there's protection for women, and we do have laws that protect women against violence, but women refrain from expressing that they are victims of violence. In most cases, they're not even aware that they're victims of violence. They are being victimized by verbal violence or physical violence. And uh, when we hear from witnesses, for example, witnesses could be the mothers of these women, then we ask, do they verbally abuse the wife? The men say, for example, you idiot, but women do not think that this is violence, or they get slapped, but they do not think that this is violence. Or when they go to the police station, they do not file a report saying that my husband is exerting violence on me. So unfortunately, our law enforcers also think that this is a domestic matter and this is a family matter and they shouldn't be intervened. And women are sent back their homes because they try to mediate the situation. Law enforcement officers try to mediate the situation. The law enforcement officers usually say that do not break up your family, and etc. So this is of course important in terms of one important issue is trust for the law, and a very important judgment of the European Court of Human Rights was mentioned, which was the basis for the Istanbul Convention. The file took so much time, and the women subject to that case, Naide Odu's case, was not protected. She became a victim of violence. She loses her mother, and a lot of issues happen to her. So the basic problem is that rather than the legislation, the perception of the society towards women is what's important. Another issue is that women are invisible. Uh, Women can go out on the streets during the day, but not in the evening. For 2.5 years, I have been living in Hopa. In Hopa, there's a street called Texas, and women don't go to that street. If they go onto that street, they admit that they are a sexual object and they are subject to some verbal abuses, and they accept this, and they cannot say anything if they go on that street. And women's status in social life is very important. Men exist in social life, but women are close to their homes. They just drink coffee and just um, chatter. But men are very active in social life. They go out on coffee houses, they go on nightclubs, they become friends, they go out on the street, and they are very social. So in Rize Bar Association, when I worked on this topic, we carried out various activities. Let me talk about them. And there are some conservative parties, left-wing and right-wing parties, including various political representations. We came together with women. We discussed what is violence, two, what is gender, and the last one was what could be protection methods. In Rize and Artvin region, we organized more than 30 training sessions, and we came together with women in terms of, for example, Istanbul Convention. In our law, we had the law number 6284. This is actually a reflection of Istanbul Convention. It could be considered as that. And the law number 6284 was subject to a lot of anti-propaganda. And some people, conservative parts of the society, call it as the home wrecking law. And of course, in the Black Sea region, we have a lot of conservative areas, and there is a great reaction against these laws when we first go out to discuss with women. We have seen it, and the women say, okay, this is protecting the women, but they were asking us, women were asking us, whether this law was a home wrecking law. But what we call home, it shouldn't be a place where women is subject to physical or verbal or sexual violence, and they cannot express this. Especially, we have tea agriculture here, and they're also subject to economic violence as well. And when we discuss whether this is a real home, and we should think that yes, we do need these laws and we do need this protection, we came up to that decision. I don't want to prolong too much. I think I exceeded my time, but if you have any questions, I will try to answer. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Elida. Yes, we are exceeding our time because at 8 o'clock, the interpretation and the Zoom account should close. So we have time only until 8 o'clock. Thank you very much for your understanding, and hope to be together in the next webinars. We are not limited to only Black Sea geography, of course, and in the other regions of Turkey, we have other contributors. We have our friends from other parts. We have Emek Değirmenci. Emek, I will leave you the floor without further ado. Hello, can you all hear me? Hello. I carry out ecofeminist activities. I published 2 books, and these books also include my own stories, but also stories from Latin America to Australia, and a struggle of Turkish women as well. Practical, philosophical, and theoretical thoughts are included in these books. The second book is an updated version of the first book. It's called Women and Nature and Feminist Discussions in Eco-Transformation. In the last 24 years, I have lived in Australia, New Zealand, and USA, and in America, sorry, and I was closely involved with the soil, with the land, and pharmacultural methods were used. I usually, especially recently in La Oyo Campesina, an agroecological movement was followed by me very closely. So today, I will talk a bit about subsistence economy. And ecofeminism was introduced in 1970s in France, Evo de Born, and in southern India, Chipko movement, and against deforestation, ecofeminism movement was initiated. And today, especially after COVID, as mentioned by our other speakers, both in the private arena and in the public arena, the caretaking role of women is fortified, and post-COVID, we have the necessity of uh, being fed with healthy food, and we really should pay great attention to the health of the soil, the water, and the air. So how could we raise awareness in the society? More than 30 years, half of my life was spent on it, was spent on struggle against mines. I'm one of the first forefront strugglers of um, anti-nuclear works, and I continued to combat this in the countries that I went to. But in the countries that I went to, I paid great attention to working with native and indigenous peoples, especially in New Zealand. I started a project on a city garden, community garden, under the leadership of migrants and refugee women, especially in terms of gender. There is a women's study that I carried out in Melbourne University, and this project just emerged in my hand due to my background. And food, when we talk about subsistence economy, what do we understand? Um, when we say subsistence economy, it means producing and consuming what we need. It is not only about food, but it is also about clothing. It is about shelter. It covers every arena of our life. We should not produce and consume more than we need. So this is actually the right opposite of the engine of capitalism. So when we talk about the first part of ecofeminism, we need to also talk about Rachel Cars with when she published the Silent Spring book. Women both in the southern and the northern hemispheres, they are very closely, women are very closely interlinked with the food and the production. And ecofeminism's own point of start is against capitalism, is against growth, is against monetary economy. From this point of view, I want to talk about Vandana Shiva because Turkey's conditions are very similar to India's conditions. Women's connection with the seed, with the soil, with water, according to, of course, the social responsibilities that are imposed on her, women are more closely connected with these elements. And today, other friends also talked about this labor of care, caretaking labor. And just thought about something during this speech. Women actually uh, is protecting the healthy seed, is keeping the healthy seed, and women also give exert great labor to protect these seeds. So women have this effort on protecting these seeds and cultivating these seeds, and as well as the care taking for men and the elderly and whoever needs care in our society, as well as this, the care responsibility for soil and the seed is also upon women. So the women have great um, responsibilities in this matter socially. So what does globalism bring to women? And Vandana Shiva underlines it, and Silvia Frederice also has important books and notes on this. Globalization and modernization brought along women's labor, know-how, existence, experience became worthless. So with globalization, with modernization, women's labor uh, became valueless, worthless. So the information, the knowledge, and the experience of women are very precious. Actually, in Anatolia, women used to treat the sick, the ones in need, uh, by traditional treatments. And this know-how of women, traditional know-how of women, is disregarded with globalization. unemployment of women also is considered, and deunionization of women by becoming deprived of their social rights is also observed in this period. And women's becoming unemployed is closely interlinked with globalization. So what happened in Turkey post-COVID? Let me mention that. Post-COVID in spring, there were signs of a food scarcity. So if we do not pay good attention to our food, if the government does not care of it in the future, in this year, we can face food scarcity. Food activists such as us, farmers, unions, started giving this warning. So after COVID, in Turkey, unfortunately, even our own people have lost their connections because the connections are disrupted due to the transitions between the rural to urban, especially in the recent years. There's a concept called seasonal workers. Previously, we used it in cotton and sugar beet cultivation. Seasonal workers were used for cotton and sugar beets, but in all areas of agriculture now we have seasonal workers, because in modernized and industrialized world, small agriculture, smallholders can only grow or die. As you know, the smallholders, small farmers, family farmers in the rural areas are no longer supported, and big farmers, industrial farmers are now in the forefront, especially, for example, to Kaz Mountains, apple pickers from Azerbaijan are brought there. And my friend was a graduate of philosophy. Sorry, Emek, you have one last minute if you could wrap up. Okay. Some of our municipalities are sensitive towards this food scarcity, and in public areas, in wide public areas, as much as they have, started planting wheat and corn. And hopefully in the upcoming years, they will further enhance. But in Europe, there's degrowth movement. So shrinking movement. I also follow that closely, and I am in contact with ecofeminists there. So global south, north, global south. I couldn't talk about this economy of solidarity, but my friends from Black Sea region talked about this very nicely in the post-COVID situation, not only in the country, but we need global solidarity. So I would like to thank previous speakers because I learned a lot from them. Okay, thank you very much, Emek, for paying attention to our warning and keeping it short. Our previous webinar recordings are put on YouTube. They're broadcasted on YouTube, and Emet Değirmenci's previous presentations can be followed from those channels, and I do believe that she will have great contribution to local struggles as well. The previous webinar presentations would be very useful. Refika Kadıoğlu, again from the Eastern Black Sea region. She's again a woman friend. She will talk about archaic language and nature defense. I'm trying to open her microphone.
Tamam.
Galiba açıldı. Herkese merhaba.
I think it's on now. Hello to everyone.
Zamanı çok iyi kullanmak lazım.
We have to use the time very well, and I'm going to change my speech a little bit. I will shorten it a little bit because my heart actually beats the same with what many people said from Guatemala or from Portuguese. The information that we received from there is not very much different from my experience. I also would like to talk about my own personal experience. I am Refika Kadıoğlu. I am a person from Fındıklı who was born and raised in the city in Istanbul. I've been living back in my region for the last 5 years, and I've been working on the Laz language, but I learned it later on because I was born and raised in the city, but I always felt that I belonged. However, the nature accumulation in the Laz language, as I experienced it, I felt myself transform, and I also observed that my perception of language also transformed, and I also put an effort to transform myself. And I actually want to talk about something very briefly. At the beginning, dear Gönül talked about Meci, and we listened to a song in the videos called Heyama. Heyama is actually a Meci song. Women would sing it together when they were working together, and Dolari is the meaning in Laz language. And the song would ask, come on all, come together, come on women, we need to dig the field of ant someone. So in order to capture the melody of the sound and the work. Heyamo is actually a very important folk song that passed on from many years, and it's been very much viral on the internet these days, and there are some other interpretations of the same song from Europe. So it is a song of magic cultures sung by women. And then afterwards, based on my relationship to nature and the Laz language, maybe I can talk about it with just one example. And that would be the only time that I have. Laz language is actually a very old language for those who do not know. For 4,000 years, Laz people from Subkuli, from the Georgian border, to Sinop, that is on the Turkish border. It is said that the Laz language has lived in this part, and it is the extension of a people that we even see in mythological stories, but only some people can still speak the Laz language. And as I learned more about the language, as I understood more about the language, I understood that the content of the language is not very much fitting for the city life, because for the last 100 years this language has become archaic. And I was faced with many things that made me very excited. For example, in the Laz language, there's no word for war or peace or trash. For example, there's no word for nature. And in the Native American language, and I think in Maoris, I think the South American people and Aborigines as well, they also do not have any word for nature, because human beings, before the capitalist system, before nation states, before cities, they did not define nature in their lives as separate from their beings. They know their limits, they know their borders, so they never defined nature as a separate entity. So naturally, there's no word for nature in the Laz language. I want to continue my speech on the word trash. How did we distance ourselves from languages, from nature, especially what we call the mother language, mother tongue, which is passed from the mother to the children. So in uh, the issue of trash, when we said there is no word for trash in the Laz language, but some people waged a war against us, saying, yes, there is a word for it in Laz language. And then what came up was that, yes, there are countless words, and we learned so many things that we are actually grateful for them. For example, there's a word called shela. I know there are some people who can speak the language, and actually that means an area for compost. And it actually only means a place or a thing that is created by bringing together organic matter that is used for cooking. For example, there's something called markveli. That is only the name of the waste of food. For example, it doesn't include hazelnut shells. And actually, they transform it by burning it. That is also not trash. So nothing that is a natural material, I mean, that material that we call trash, that we do not know what to do with, does not have any corresponding word for in the Laz language. For example, some plants, fern, for example, was placed next to the road so that they would be smoothed down, and then they would be placed under animals, for example, in winter. There's a word for it. So I became closer to nature, closer to myself, thanks to Lao's language. And then I once again witnessed the fact that we're not different from each other. Our friend from Guatemala was speaking. I don't want to be mistaken. Maybe it was Mariam, but she said, we are losing our soul when we eat food without souls. And I am now reading a book, and I really recommend you to read this book about dukas. Dukas are very old and ancient people living in Mongolia. They say everything you see around you has a spirit, everything. So any movement that you breathe, you need to be aware, and you need to be very careful so that you would not be disrespectful against the soul of any creature. Hope that we will listen to each other, we will draw our limits by knowing our limits, and produce together. Thank you very much who contributed with their efforts. If there are any questions, I will be here. Could you share the song, because in the chat box there have been, so I will try to sing it.
Yamo, hey yamo, hey yamo, hey hey yamo, mani mani da lepe, mani mani da lepe diye gidiyor.
Çok teşekkür ederim Refika.
Beraber söyleriz.
Keyifli.
Thank you very much, Refika, for this information. I think it's now time for us to learn the language as well. That's what it seems like. Well, I'm sure that it is filled with information that we all need. Again, we have our friends from different parts of Turkey, so we wanted to create a blend. Sevil Baştürk will be talking about the vegetable garden, Roma vegetable garden, so that it will be an example. In Istanbul, there's also a video, and in the previous webinars, you can also see video available. Right now, we have limited time, so we cannot show the video, Sevil. We apologize. So you now have 10 minutes to talk about your Rome vegetable garden there, and you had some suggestions there for a new urban order. You also shot a documentary in Fındıklı. Water is not talking to us anymore, so you put in efforts there. So we wanted to make sure that you're also here, part of this forum. Thank you very much. I was not the one who did the documentary. Actually, it was Hülya Köksal. Let me just correct that. But in the fight about the hydropower plant, I was in Fındıklı for a very long time, between 2009 to 2011. And for the women in Black Sea, I think life defender, that word came up in the resistance in Black Sea. And then we started using the term very much in Istanbul. It was something that we learned from women in the Black Sea, because they would say we are defending life when we started the fight against the hydropower plant. For 2-3 days, Beyza Üstün has been taken in custody. I want to talk about her as well, and we want her to be released as soon as possible in the fight for ecology, and then also the fight for the hydropower plant in the Black Sea. She was a person who shouldered all the burdens, and she is an academician, Beyza Üstün, and a group of HDP politicians have been taken under arbitrary custody for 2 days, and I think it's been 3 days, and we hope that they will be released as soon as possible. Well, the Rome Garden in Istanbul is actually, when we are faced with a regime that is based on the sharing of profit from Kaz Dağları to Hasankeyf, there are mining projects, there are thermal plant projects and hydroelectricity power plants. And again, everything has been broken down. And in the cities, we see that the cities are being broken down, and the public spheres, through planning processes, is now turning into a tool for creating and sharing profit. And as people of the city, we need to shoulder part of the burden. We need to take up responsibility. Even if we cannot change anything, we need to show that we can change the ecosystem of our own neighborhood. So we were also faced with the following in these planning processes. Very suddenly, first of all, let me show you the Roma Garden, the place of the garden, so that you will also have an idea on what we're talking about. So Roma Garden is in Cihangir, in Galata Port. It is a park of 9,000 square meters, and we're only using 1 acre of this park. There are four. Suddenly, we were faced with these plans, and in these plans, the part that is indicated in blue, there are four social service buildings that were being planned, that which would would be 3 stories. And in Beyoğlu, there are 350 cafes, and that was the last thing that was needed, but it was apparently considered to be needed. So we, rather than saying what we do not want this, we wanted to show what we wanted. And as an example of where we showed what we wanted, we built the Roma Garden. This was designed with permaculture design principles, because there is you can see it, I think, right, on the screen? You can see it on the screen, right? Yes, we can see it. There's a slope of 45 degrees there. It was this kind of a terrain. And then with permaculture practices here, we wanted to have a garden where we would harvest products in all 4 seasons, and the plants would be edible and multi-annual plants. We made sure to select such plants, and we created a garden in this way. We planned this project to be a gradual one, and the second project, in the second phase, we would create a food forest. In a food forest, we would have the normal, or imitate a normal forest ecosystem, and there we have 9 different types of fruit trees, and there are 29 different varieties of plants. And in 2011, there was a court case by the associations, and then the Council of State quashed this court decision, and a court expert was assigned, and we submitted a report to the court showing what we wanted to do, and then we won the case. Later on, everyone told us that we were dreaming, and we were also very much surprised, but just below we have Galata Port, and just above we have Gezi Park, and this is the last green area left in Cihangir. So even if we win it right now with a new planning process, we are still under a threat every time, and we're not ignoring that threat. But right now, with the changing management of the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, this has now gained a new identity with the changing city landscape, and we wanted this to be an example to other neighborhoods as well. There is no other such garden in Istanbul. So in all of these processes, we wanted to create new areas, creating new spaces where we would be able to breathe in the fight against these practices that would fragment further the city. And this was actually another type of social fight. Everything that we did there, we explained about it, we taught about it, we shared it, and all the children from the primary schools from the neighborhood were given seed balls, and we watched the other spectators who became freer. So we turned a public space into a joint space. But when there is life in these public and joint helpless spaces, it becomes a joint space. And if there's life, then it happens. So we established life there, and we watched theaters, cinema, films, and we used the products that we produced to cook in the migrant solidarity kitchens. What else did we do? Well, therefore, urban people were transformed from being merely objectors into producers, actually. So it was actually an example of a political movement. So in the future, what kind of a city do we want? A self-sufficient city where we are the deciders. And what shows this in the best way? The Roma Garden was the best example to this, actually. And many people in the city want to live in better conditions, healthier conditions, and we want to have a say in where we live. And the Roma Garden, in Roma Garden, we believe that we created such an example. I don't want to be self-praising, but we have social media accounts, we have a website, and I'm speaking so fast, I lost track of what I already talked about and what I should talk about. So you can also follow us on our social media accounts and our website. Right now, the greatest problem is climate change. And global warming and climate change based on human actions. As a result of them, our access to food and about what comes later on, it is very evident that every green space is very valuable for us. We are really faced with a massive destruction and we need to fight against this. This is all that I can say for now. And if you have any questions, maybe I can reply to them.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much. We are now in the last half hour. We have two speakers. The next speaker is our friend from the Balkans, from Bosnia-Herzegovina, Ivana Kulic. Ivana is from the Friends of the World, and she wanted to participate very much but couldn't. In the Balkans, there was an important meeting about dams and hydropower plants. That's why she couldn't come, but instead of that, she recorded a video of 10 minutes. We will now watch the video and we will ask our interpreters to interpret this into Turkish and Spanish.
Okay, it's recording. So, hello everybody. Unfortunately, I can't be present for the event, so hopefully this message will come in this online form. My name is Kulic. I am from Friends of the Earth International. I work for the working group that's working on gender and of patriarchy, but I'm locally based in Bosnia-Herzegovina in Center for Environment, where I'm leading the activist group, but I'm also attached to the rest of the programs that we are dealing. And one of the program that's dealing with dirty thermal projects that are based on coal and the new trend of hydropower dams. So the hydropower dams are all hydropower dams are, and they are quite present. We have around 240 rivers, and the number of planned dams is 300. So basically, almost on every river, and on several of them, even like 5 to 7 of dams are planned to be built. So what is the issue, if you're not much aware about this topic, is that the small hydropower dams are of no use to anybody. they are a big problem to the local community that's left without any water. They are a problem to our biodiversity since they are usually not built in a good way, and the fish can't move properly. So we have one whole population of animals dying, and they are just making a lot of issues with like noise pollution and in general with the construction going on. But if it's that big number of them being built, somebody has some benefit from them. And who benefits? It's foreign companies that are building it in Balkans since they can't do it in the European Union. And actually we had an Austrian activist who came to Bosnia and talked about the situation here, and he actually said that all of those things happened in Austria in like 70s. They destroyed 2 rivers and said, no, this is not happening. But now Austrian companies are coming here because we don't have those types of regulations. And bribe is another thing that's quite popular with the bad politics, and everybody's accepting it. So we have the foreign companies as owners and the private investors. The private investors are basically friends of the ruling party, the businessmen of this world. So we know that they just get these deals and subventions from the country. So they don't need to invest a lot of the money, but they get a lot of the money. And also because the constructions are from concrete, they're like a barrier on the river. The concrete companies are also the ones benefiting from it. So what is happening with when once you build a dam, so you destroy the biodiversity, you leave the community without any drinking water, and the amount of electricity energy that's generated is so small that it's not even worth mentioning. You can't power anything with that, and it's comparing to the like sustainable sources of energy. It's in no textbook a good investment. So it's just a project for generating money for the people who already have it, and to kind of support their own projects besides that. And what is happening with the local communities is that they are left without drinking water. I have to emphasize that the Balkans are one of the regions known for the most clear drinking water, and almost in every village you can just go to the river and drink it, which is quite rare for the Europe and something that we really need to protect and keep in our mind, and in generally in world with the current situation of pollution and climate change and droughts. So the local communities have been resisting the projects, but there is a big issue of threats going on. And obviously when you have big businessmen on one side and people from smaller communities, the violence is quite often used as a tool. So most commonly the threats are made by, the like private security of those businessmen who go around the meetings of activists and, kind of fear monger around them. And the rest is also made that a lot of activists experience the online violence in a form of Facebook messages and threats in that form. So the current projects, so we haven't had any reports of physical violence. It's mostly in that realm of like verbal and online threats, and hopefully there will be no physical violence. But one big issue is the police that's also on the side of these investors, especially in small communities where people have this perception of police as some untouchable identity and a body. So police is quite aware of it and uses that quite often. Recently we had an example of a Facebook group for the activists of one small community in Foča, and they were actually just discussing, and people were commenting the things on a post, and somebody mentioned like, we really need to get these machines out of our community, and the police saw that as like a violent extremist group, even though they're not reacting to any other form of violence. So what is also important to mention is that a few days ago, it was a 3 years anniversary of attack on Kruščica women. That's a case where we had the direct link between women's rights and the rights for our protection of our rivers and water. The attack happened 3 years ago in a small village near Vitez in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the local community was trying to protect the river. That is their like main resource for surviving, for the drinking water. But the investors starting without any permission the building on the construction site. So the local community blocked the bridge, and they had the continuous shifts of 24 hours, and somebody was present on that bridge to protect it. And on 1 August at 5 a.m., the group of women were protecting it, since they thought that the attacks wouldn't happen if they saw mothers and the children were present. But the private police came, the security guards, and they physically attacked the children, the women, and everybody present there. And because the connections are made, when they went to the bigger town Travnik, that's located nearby, to get a medical assistance, they weren't allowed to enter the hospital and they weren't received proper care. So that was 3 years ago. The case was quite famous because of all the bad things that happened, but the good things happened that those women were really brave and nobody could stop them. So that was kind of the inspiration for them to really even more protect the river. So they managed to save their local community and the river, but the threats were still ongoing on. And what is important to say is that at that point we had a direct attack on women, since the security forces, they saw them, as the weaker gender that can be frightened easily. And they thought, if we attack them, that's it, our business is done, we are going to build this dam. But they don't realize the power that these women were holding. And just because they had those roles of mothers, of community guardians, they were really realizing what that water means to them. So from that example of Kruščica, we really saw that we need to connect the movements of environmentalists and feminist movements, because we all have the kind of our focus of the issues, but these issues are really intersectional and we really need to approach them in that way. So what we are trying to build now is that when we have like community gatherings and support to the smaller communities, we always invite other NGOs and invite other groups, not just the ecological ones, to join us in this struggle and to spread the message. One thing is also that the Balkans, as a lot of the countries in the global south, is facing a lot of issues with the government versus non-governmental organizations, and a lot of restrictions want to be imposed to kind of stop us in our work. So this sector really needs to stick together to make things happen and to support each other, because nobody else is going to support us if we don't do it mutually. And what is really important is that a lot of people still in the Balkans don't really realize this importance of what is happening with climate change and why we need to protect the waters so much. Because there is this perception, we have more than 200 rivers, what if we lose some? But even the smallest loss of a river can destroy the livelihoods.
Evet, teşekkür ediyorum.
Yes, thank you very much to our interpreters as well. And of course, there are a lot of common points, but I don't want to take too much of your time, and I want to leave the floor to the last speaker, Ms. Özlem Şendeniz. Again, Özlem is going to continue this discussion based on her own work. She's going to give us the last speech. Özlem, you have the last word, the finale. Hello? You can hear me well, right? Yes. Okay, great. Yes, this was a 4-hour online session, and thank you very much for staying with us and showing your patience until the last speech. And I would like to thank the team for organizing such a smooth meeting. I'm in Fındıklı, and my academic interest area and the place I live in is combined, and I'm one of the lucky people who can combine these two. Very fastly, in a determinist way, I will try to give you these dual uh, concepts. I prepared a small presentation. Here we have hydropower plants, women, and social actions. And in Fındıklı hydroelectric power plants, we have women experiences, and I will try to talk about this. And I will talk about smoke and mirrors issue. We have the story of smoke and mirrors, but we cannot see the entire picture because of these. Since 2007, there is a successful hydroelectric power plant struggle in Fındıklı, and I realize that I will try to use time in the best way, but I'm mixing it up a bit, sorry. Fındıklı hydroelectric power plant resistance, women's participation in social actions, and women's political participation and representation will be my focus points. And the methodology here is that as we are looking for Fındıklı, and as I continue my academical research, I had the opportunity to do autoethnography and oral history activities. And my master's thesis is on Fındıklı hydroelectric power plant opposition. I was using the word opposition back then, but I will talk about resistance today. And I will talk about using the social actions repertoire. In my master's thesis, I'm talking about this as well. And one of the outputs was that women are more active in the resistance against hydroelectric power plant in Fındıklı. So they're involved in this action and in communication. And that was my outcome or conclusion of my study. And based on this outcome, we carried out 2 more research studies, and one was together with Deus. And between the ages 23 to 83, women at the ages between 23 to 83, how their daily lives changed after they participated in demonstrations. We asked women these questions. So participation in social actions, how would that affect women's daily lives and their participation in decision-making activities. So in Fındıklı hydroelectric power plant resistance, we learned some things. Before women's daily lives, I have to talk about this. We learned that neoliberal policies are interlinked with commodification of water. And this small community, we live in a small community in Rize, and we have seen how interlinked we were all around the globe, from Bosnia Herzegovina to Latin America, a lot of places. Natural resources, the nature itself was the joint point, and the nature itself was becoming a commodity. And this, if we continue with hydroelectric power plants, we should say that the companies producing or companies selling water are not producing water, they're producing plastic bottles, and they're selling us water in these plastic bottles. So in Fındıklı hydroelectric power plant resistance, we learned these. We have a good, successful resistance story, and we should say that it is ongoing since 2007. And yes, in 3 valleys, no hydroelectric power plants were built, but it doesn't mean no one intervened. There were river rehabilitations on these valleys, and they were limited with concrete blocks, and we are not seeing this. And this is a story that we are seeing between smoke and mirrors. So what is the story of women here? In the speeches that I mentioned, in the study that I mentioned, when we interviewed with women, when we were placing this idea, we tried to separate two notions. We saw nature as belonging to women, but decisions on nature belong to men. This is how we have perceived it. I'm aware that I am using some labels and I'm using two gender concept, but I don't have enough time. That is why I'm using these labels. But women can collect the tea, can harvest the tea and work on tea cultivation, but men sell the tea. And this private area, the political and public area, actually belong to men. So the private area and the public area are transformed. And the private area, was it involved in the political area, we can only see it in the threats. In Armenia presentation, we have seen how militarist perception was combined with the perception of threat. So in this situation, the threat was against nature, and women build, let's say, nature at home, and it was being interlinked with the nature outside their home, because there's a river flowing outside the home, and their seed was being poisoned by GMOs, and this is the threat. And when we look at social movement repertoire, we see that this communication and action perception is involving women very actively on the field. But unfortunately, this doesn't flow in decision-making mechanisms, and there's a separation here, and I see it in my research, and I see it in different research studies on the field. So women representation in politics, their participation in policy making, why are they not sufficiently represented? Women are active in social movements, but why are they not included in decision-making mechanisms? There's a wall here, and this wall needs to crack. And since the beginning, we have been listening to these explanations about fındıklı. We are seeing a crack, but this crack is not enough. So we shouldn't see this example through pink glasses, because still there's a wall, and on both sides of the wall there are decision makers and the ones who do not make decisions. So in daily life practice, after we participate in resistance, we ask when women's lives are impacted or not. I always remember an example expressed by a mother-in-law. The mother-in-law says, my daughter-in-law participated in the demonstrations, and since then she is behaving badly towards my son. So this is a private home story, but there is the public sector from this home, and we are there in the public sector, and to have it more transparent, to have it more equal, and have it more respectful towards nature. For us to be able to build this story requires the development of the transcendence between the two, and women protecting their lives and their homes, and women protecting their public. We need the both. And the women who are in the forefront of defending the rivers, these activist women, should also transit to decision-making mechanisms. Unfortunately, this is not easy. Even when we think they are there, they're not. So in the last minute, it could be a male who let's say, nominates a woman president. So I will not, I will close this subject because I want to use the time better. But when we look at the press and when we look at the photos on the media when women are standing strong against gendarmerie, but as long as we do not keep them in politics, we do not bring them in politics, they're only tools. But as a researcher, when I act towards my home and my case in an equal manner and efficient manner, I see that there is a let's say transitivity between the society or public and our private lives. So in its essence, the relation that women build with nature should be considered. So the attacks towards the home, towards your domestic life, should not only be internalized by women, but also they should be considered in the central politics, and they should not be left out of the central politics. So this outsider status should be implicit in the system. And I want to talk about the wall metaphor. This wall has one side out and one side in, and we need to see this crack, but after this crack we need to destroy the wall. I don't know what we will do with the leftovers, with the remaining wall parts, but we need more movement to grow the crack and to destroy the wall. So this is something that I feel as a good metaphor. And in all wars, some people will be left outside of the wall. It doesn't matter which side you're on. If there's a wall, some people will be left out of that wall. Us bringing down the wall is required, and we need to have our place, not include any walls. If under the pandemic, if we can break the wall in such a pandemic situation, if we can do it verbally online, if we can do World March of Women discussion online, then we will this means that there's still hope for us, and we can bring down the walls and we can further extend these cracks. Thank you very much for all presentations, and I hope I didn't take too much time. Thank you very much, Özlem. This was a very good presentation, and we hope to continue in the future, because you talked about very good topics, and we are, of course, seeing it important how these struggles are feminized, and we should transform them, transform this struggle. So as much as struggle, transformation is important. That is why we march for transformation. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your patience. 4 hours is too much, of course, but it was a very full 4 hours. 4 hours was very, of course, long for an online meeting, but this is the first step. This is just a start. We will continue to discuss, to converse, and to create our agenda. And of course, behind the scenes, there are technical contributors here. And I want to present this right now. They are in Fındıklı. And our male colleague here with the red shirt is the trainer of Fındıklı Women's Choir, Serdar. Gönül is from Women Council. She's the first speaker. Berin is from Youth Council and Youth Center. And Tuba, you haven't seen her on the screen, but she's behind the scenes. And also we have Zeynep Alıca. Zeynep, could you turn on your mic? Maybe you can, our friends can see you.
Ben de teşekkür
You can say
ediyorum.
hello.
Çevirmenlere de ayrıca teşekkür ediyorum. Hep unutuluyorlar ya. O yüzden.
Tuğba burada gene. Tuğba merhaba diyebilirsin. Mikrofon aç.
Merhaba, sabrınız için de teşekkür ederim. Burada çok
Hello, I also would like to thank you very much for your patience. Hülya, where are you? Hülya kept writing to you and sending messages using the chat box. We also have Hülya with us. Gönül Yılmaz. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone. And of course, for listening to us, we have silent guests, Wilhelmina. Wilhelmina